The bell curve meme. A meme that can truly only be understood by those with below average intelligence, but also by those with perfectly average intelligence, but also those with incredibly high intelligence. In fact, it doesn't matter how much IQ you do or do not have, you are somewhere on this bell curve. But why explain it when I could just show you? Man, I love being at the bottom of the bell curve. I don't need to worry about being smart. That's why I comment on a YouTube video before even watching any of it. If I comment first, people will recognize that I was the first person to comment, and that means a lot to me. No! You can't just comment first. You have to watch the video. Comments are arbitrary algorithm boosting metrics. They don't actually mean anything if they don't come from a source of substance. You have to enjoy the video first, and then you can provide a comment that shows that you actually watched the video. The top comment is gay. The bell curve meme derives its name from the bell curve, otherwise known as a Gaussian distribution or a normal distribution. This is supposed to graph the distribution of things that have a normal distribution. That's a lot of words defined by their own words. What exactly does it mean? Basically, it means that almost all points of a data set will fall to a median, and most everything that has a normal distribution will be a rough amount of standard deviations above it and below it. For instance, if you take a look at the bell curve, this actually plots most everything you can think of that has a normal distribution. The height of humans. Most people are in the middle, some people are above, some people are below. And the farther you get away from the average height, the less people that there are that are incredibly short or incredibly tall. This also applies to the size of your boobs. This also applies to your ability to reach a certain rank in League of Legends. This also applies to IQ. This also applies to the number of hairs on your head. Basically everything. The idea of this is that if something has a normal distribution, it will end up looking like this bell curve when plotted on this sort of graph. As a funny Easter egg, if you were to take a normal distribution of the size of your boobs and plot it onto a bell curve, that bell curve would look like a boob. I understand this is the deep-hitting journalism you come to me for. Don't worry, I will deliver. The interesting thing about the bell curve meme is that the meme that we most commonly associate with it, with the lowest IQ individuals having roughly the same opinion as the highest IQ individuals on the graph, despite having slightly different reasoning for coming to the exact same conclusion, is actually a slightly different concept. This is known as the horseshoe theory, the idea that the farther away you get from the middle of something, the closer you actually get to each other. You know, like a horseshoe, kind of. The idea of the bell curve, as well as the idea of the horseshoe theory, all comes from political ideologies. In fact, the first known use of the bell curve meme was posted to 4chan in a way that depicted both ends resulting in having the same opinion, and it was basically showcasing that outside of the median of being a Democrat, whether you were incredibly low or high IQ, this one 4chan user felt you would inevitably end up Republican. I think it's important when talking about memes to not completely ignore the political origins of a vast majority of the memes that we talk about, but don't worry, thankfully, aside from the actual creation of this thing, that's about as far as the politics necessarily need to get with this one. Rather, we can enjoy the fact that there are a number of different applications in which absolute beginners and absolute experts in a situation can come to the same conclusion, albeit with varying reasoning for doing so. I wish there was a word for that. GamerSupps has a launch today at 3 p.m. Eastern, which should be about an hour after this video goes live. There is a new collection known as the Reverse Cowgirl. I can't believe they keep getting away with it. Cowgirl-themed shaker cups, merch, shot glasses, and more, all limited time available. If you want to snag any of this, link in the description for 10% off your order using discount code Sumito. Pick it up as soon as it goes live, and thank you so much for supporting the channel. Ha ha ha! Big titties and big ass. I will purchase. No, not a sponsored ad read in my YouTube video. I didn't come here to be advertised to. I wanted to see funny video about memes. I have no respect for the amount of time it takes to make one of these videos. Financial stability on YouTube isn't my concern as a viewer. YouTube monetization is a fickle mistress, and I recognize how difficult it can be for creators to turn their work into a career. I will support them by purchasing the big ass and big titties. One of my favorite implementations of the bell curve meme are those that deal with like big philosophical ideologies, because like the notion that everything ultimately doesn't end up mattering feels like something that you would both hear from like a monk that has spent his entire life trying to pursue deeper understanding of why we're here on Earth. But like, that's also the take you would get from like a baby that understands nothing, and they're both equally correct. This baby has no object permanence. When you hide yourself playing peekaboo, the baby thinks you have disappeared, because if it can't see you, you don't exist. The midwit in this example, the vast majority of people have object permanence. If I can see something, surely it's there. But then you have the ultimate enlightened one, who understands that anything only exists within the time period of which it can be observed. And at the end of the day, at some point, we will all return to dust. What is object permanence if permanence itself is a concept that is merely temporary and based on the observer viewing it? In reality, nothing is permanent. I hate this so much. The important thing to understand when it comes to the IQ meme is not just that the idiot and the enlightened one both have the same opinion. It's that they have their own reasoning for such that is generally only relatable to if you share in that thought process. For instance, if somebody were to say they hate League of Legends, right? There is a difference in the way that I would interpret that based on whether or not they play League of Legends or if they don't play League of Legends. If you don't play League and you say, I hate League of Legends, then you're the idiot on this graph. You don't actually have an opinion on the matter. You're just parroting what other people say about the game because you think it's a popular opinion to have. And that's low IQ shit. Meanwhile, the midwits are anybody who has been playing League of Legends for, I don't know, less than a couple years, or anybody who doesn't take it particularly seriously. You can have a ton of fun in the game. There's stuff you will like and stuff you won't like. The esports scene is huge. You probably have a ton of friends that all hop together and play an organized game where there's team compositions and you can try hard, there's communication. League of Legends is great for the majority of people. But then you have the people who have been playing League of Legends for 10 plus years and recognize that with the commercialization of Riot Games making it so that the newest champions are completely unbalanced, the fact that the new items make it basically impossible to garner a lead that you can actually do something with, the introduction of the Otacon and so many forced team fights make it so the games ultimately feel like they take longer than they ever have while simultaneously receiving less control over the game that you're playing. When you really know what you're talking about, League of Legends sucks. I would argue that there is a little bit of nuance when it comes to the differing opinions. Like, for instance, in this bell curve, the DM experience, when the game runner is the person who is supposed to ultimately shape your experience when playing a game of Dungeons and Dragons, it really comes down to their talent, right? And I don't ever think it's a great idea to wing it if you don't know what you're talking about. Obviously, the more knowledgeable the dungeon master, the better they'll be able to be at coming up with ideas and concepts off the top of their head. But as somebody who has been on the receiving end of a DM just winging it,
you got an 8.
Out of 10?
This is such a terrible idea. You would have to roll a 20.
I'm a brown guy in a lab coat. Who the fuck is questioning me? It's not always as big brain as this graph makes it seem. But what exactly is the difference when the ends seem to be identical? If somebody's doing something and somebody else is doing something, how is there this massive gap of people doing this other thing that somehow separates those first two people? The reality is knowledge and experience. There is a difference between somebody who is guy turtling because they don't know how to actually play a fighting game versus somebody who's guy turtling because they understand that that's the only way to win a particular matchup. There is no difference between what they're actually doing, but there is a massive difference in the reason that they're doing it. And ironically, the only way to go from doing something with no knowledge to doing the exact same thing with the knowledge is to go through the bell curve. One cannot go from the brainlet to the enlightened one without first becoming the midwit. If you like instant coffee, but you've never had any other sort of proper brewed coffee, then you don't know what's out there. But once you become the midwit, in pursuit of greater knowledge and flavor, taste, and complexity, only then can you then appreciate that the inconsistencies that come alongside the multiple different brewing methods there are for coffee, can you finally come to the conclusion that the consistency and simple of ease that comes with instant coffee makes it the ultimate choice. Until you've been drinking coffee for long enough that you realize the only proper way to brew coffee is Turkish coffee. The reality is that the bell curve is not necessarily a route of which you are supposed to start and then finish. The reality is that with basically everything in life, it is a never-ending cycle of realizing that you are the brainlet, and then deciding that you need to pursue greater knowledge in order to one day become the enlightened one, only to then realize that you've only come as far as when you first started. And the reality is that this never-ending cycle in pursuit of knowledge to become something that you could only then recognize isn't that different from what you were when you first started, now able to be seen thanks to the knowledge that you have, is what life is. Note one last thing about the bell curve, and that is that the midwit, the one who is supposed to be encompassing of everybody else, is the only one who seems to be comparing himself to anybody else. The brainlet has an idea, an opinion that is based only on his own experience, a lack thereof but his own, whereas the midwit is consistently portrayed as somebody who only has the experience and opinions that he does in comparison to those who he deems to be less knowledgeable than himself. And as we pursue ourselves to the other end, we notice that the enlightened one is yet again ignorant of the thought processes of anybody else, and rather is making his own opinion much like the brainlet based on only his own experience, of which he has now experienced himself. In reality, the true brainlet is the midwit for not realizing he is the midwit, and the true enlightened one is the brainlet for not caring that he isn't the enlightened one. It's like that meme where if you take a personality test to learn what character you are from The Office, if you were to take that personality test over and over again until you got Jim, that has proven that you are in fact Michael Scott. To go one step further, I think Michael Scott from The Office is actually an interesting test of the bell curve IQ meme. At the brainlet stage, you think that Michael Scott is a good boss because he's fun and he's unorthodox. And then in the middle, you have everybody going, no, he's racist, he's homophobic, he's not really an effective boss. In fact, the HR department has so much work solely because of him. Every problem has existed in the office because of the eccentric personality and nature of Michael Scott. And then the enlightened one understands that everything Michael Scott has done has been in pursuit of being not only the best boss, but the best father figure that he can be for the office. He is not just a good boss, he is the ultimate boss to a fault. Ironically still, the bell curve meme is one that you have now experienced in full. At first, you may think that it's a funny meme without any understanding, but then you go through this video and learn that there are different caveats and nuances, that this meme is not perfect, that there are many examples of it that come from political ideologies designed just to ostracize people on opposite ends of the spectrum, and there are other interpretations of this meme that result in just completely simplifying and diminishing the nuances and the details that come into video games, breast sizes, and whatever else we've talked about. But once you become enlightened and understand every facet of what makes the bell curve meme so great, can you truly appreciate that it's a funny meme. Thanks for watching. Peace.